The void had no sound, no air, no light to pierce its eternal blackness. Yet, within that cold, infinite sea, something stirred. A ripple moved through the warp, a violent distortion of reality itself. It was not the natural shifting of the Imperium, nor the deliberate hand of a chaos god. This was different. It was sudden, raw, and unbound, as though the universe itself had flinched. At the heart of that ripple, a figure appeared. A man, though one would hesitate to call him such in a galaxy of giants and monsters. Bald-headed, wearing a simple yellow tunic and white cape now scorched and torn by forces beyond comprehension, he drifted weightless in the void. Saitama's expression was one of mild confusion, his brow slightly furrowed, as though he had simply taken a wrong turn on his way home. The moment his body materialized, the warp screamed. Across its twisted currents, entities both ancient and malevolent turned their attention toward the anomaly. Daemons howled without knowing why. Cultists awoke from fever dreams with blood streaming from their eyes. Even the four great chaos gods stirred in their realms, their collective gaze sharpening upon this single insignificant speck. In the realm of Khorne, rivers of blood boiled higher. The blood god rumbled with interest, sensing a warrior who carried no fear, no hatred, only a strange, unyielding calm. To Khorne, this was both an insult and a challenge. In Tinch's crystalline towers, infinite eyes blinked open at once, the shifting architect of fate whispering in 1,000 tongues. A variable had entered his labyrinth, one he had not foreseen. His schemes faltered, and then reshaped themselves around this new piece on the board. Slaanesh inhaled sharply, a single note of twisted pleasure at the raw potential of sensation surrounding this intruder. And in the rotting garden of Nurgle, flies swarmed thick as the Plaguefather chuckled, sensing the delicate balance of despair and hope now tilting ever so slightly. Saitama, unaware of any of this, drifted aimlessly, arms crossed. He blinked slowly, his breath even. "Huh," he muttered, his voice muted by the vacuum, his words lost to the stars. "This doesn't look like this." Far below him, a world turned slowly, a sphere of grey ash and towering stone spires, its surface marred by craters and blackened ruins. Vast cathedrals stretched like skeletal fingers into the clouds, each one shrouded in the haze of burning incense and industrial smoke. Armored figures patrolled the surface, their movements rigid and precise. Voxcasters blared litanies of devotion, their static-choked words declaring praise to an unseen, all-powerful emperor. The shrine world of Caltheron was a place of ceaseless worship and unending fear. Its population lived and died beneath the weight of faith, their every breath a prayer against the horrors lurking beyond the stars. Pilgrims knelt on cracked stone floors whispering the same words over and over, their voices trembling as they begged for deliverance. Above them gargoyle-faced statues leered, their hollow eyes watching with eternal judgment. As Saitama's body entered the planet's thin atmosphere, streaks of fire bloomed around him. He descended like a comet, the air ripping past his ears, his cape flapping violent. Still his expression barely changed. "Well," he said with a small sigh, "guess I should land somewhere soft." There was nothing soft to land on. He struck the surface with a thunderous impact, pulverizing stone and sending shards flying in all directions. The ground cratered beneath him, shock waves rattling ancient buildings. Pilgrims screamed and scattered, some dropping to their knees in frantic prayer, others fleeing as though the end times had come. Saitama rose slowly, dust clouding around him. He brushed at his cape with one hand, frowning faintly at the tear near his shoulder. "Man, this is my only cape too." Before he could gather his bearings, a new sound rolled across the horizon, a low, guttural roar that did not belong to any human threat. The sky split with streaks of burning metal as ships descended, their hulls marked with symbols of jagged, writhing chaos. From their bellies poured warped creatures, warriors clad in spiked armor, their eyes burning with madness. They shouted praises to dark gods as they charged, blades raised high. Chaos had come to claim Caltheron. The pilgrims wailed in terror. Some ran toward the great cathedrals desperate for sanctuary. Others clutched relics to their chests, screaming prayers until their voices broke. Amid the chaos, Imperial soldiers rallied, Luscans snapping to life as orders were barked over the din. Saitama stood at the center of it all, head tilted slightly as he watched the armored figures charge toward him. Their appearance was grotesque, their movements filled with frenzied. They reminded him faintly of the monsters back home, though there was something different about these foes. They were not merely villains. They radiated a darkness so deep it seemed to gnaw at the air itself. One of the warriors, larger than the rest, broke ahead of the pack. His chain axe revved, teeth spinning as he roared a challenge in a guttural tongue. The very ground seemed to tremble beneath his charge. Saitama sighed, rolling his shoulders. "All right, I guess I'll deal with this guy first." The warrior swung, the chain axe a blur of spinning steel and roaring fury. Saitama didn't flinch, he didn't even move. The axe connected squarely with his head and shattered. For a moment, there was silence. Then Saitama raised one fist, almost lazily, and tapped the warrior in the chest. The armored figure exploded into a spray of molten metal and shredded flesh, leaving only a crater and a smoking helmet behind. All around them, the battlefield froze. Chaos warriors faltered mid-charge. Imperial soldiers stared, mouths open beneath their helmets. The pilgrims went silent, their prayers caught in their throats. Above them, unseen but very much aware, the warp screamed again. This time, it was not confusion, it was hunger. Saitama looked at the stunned crowd, his brow furrowed slightly. "Okay," he said softly, "where exactly am I?" Far away, deep within the currents of the Immaterium, a whisper rose. Countless voices spoke as one, echoing across time and space, each word dripping with malice and promise. "He has come, he who defies all limits, a mortal without fear, a weapon without a master." The four Chaos gods listened, and for the first time in 10,000 years, they agreed on a single thought. He must be theirs. As Saitama stood alone amid ruins and smoke, a distant war horn sounded. The sky darkened as more dropships descended, their shadows blotting out the sun. Whatever strange world he had stumbled into, it was very clear he had not arrived quietly, and he would not be allowed to leave. The smoke from the shattered cathedral spires curled upward, mingling with the drifting ash that never ceased to fall across Calthuran's skies. The air was heavy, thick with the acrid tang of burnt incense and the stench of blood. The planet itself seemed to groan beneath centuries of ceaseless worship and war, its surface scarred by trenches and bones buried beneath cracked stone streets. Saitama stood in the center of the ruined square, the crater of his arrival still steaming at his feet. Around him, the Imperial soldiers and terrified pilgrims remained frozen in stunned silence, their minds struggling to reconcile what they had just witnessed. The last fragments of the Chaos warrior he had casually destroyed still sizzled on the broken stone. The warped invaders, moments before roaring with unholy zeal, now shifted uneasily, their guttural chants faltering. They were creatures born of madness and slaughter, fearless and devoted to their dark gods, yet what they had seen unsettled even them. One warrior snarled something in his guttural tongue and fell back, his clawed gauntlet tightening on his weapon. Saitama glanced around, his cape fluttering faintly in the rising heat from burning buildings. His expression remained blank, his voice calm and almost bored. "So, you guys don't seem friendly." His words, of course, were lost on them, but the tone carried an unmistakable weight. The Chaos warband roared again, shaking off their hesitation. More came pouring through the ruined gates, twisted abominations clad in spiked armor, and daimonic mutations, their banners drenched in blood. Their leader barked an order, and the warriors surged forward in a tide of teeth, metal and rage. Saitama tilted his head slightly. "Guess that's a no." The battle erupted. Bolter fire split the air, heavy shells detonating around the advancing horde. Imperial guardsmen fired from behind sandbag barricades, their lasguns crackling weakly in comparison to the guttural roar of the enemy's weapon. Their officers screamed litanies of faith and duty, trying to hold the line. The pilgrims fled in every direction, some clutching sacred relics, others simply running with wild terror. Above, the cathedral bells tolled wildly, not from human hands, but from the tremors shaking the ground. Saitama moved without hurry. He stepped forward, meeting the charge head-on. A spiked axe swung at his head. He caught it between two fingers and snapped it like dry wood. A mutated beastman lunged with a jagged spear, only to be sent flying over a shattered wall with a single backhand. His motions were effortless, his punches casual, yet every strike left devastation in its wake. To the Imperials watching, it was a vision both divine and terrifying. They saw a lone figure wading through heretics and daemons, his simple garb unstained, his expression unchanging, while their finest soldiers died screaming. Whispers spread through the ranks like wildfire. A saint. Some murmured in awe, others muttered a weapon sent by the Emperor himself. The more cynical stared in silence, their faith shaken and reforged in equal measure. But the tide of chaos did not break easily. The ground itself seemed to heave as a monstrous creature emerged from the smoke, a daemon of pure hatred, its form shifting between flesh and nightmare. It towered over the battlefield, its mouth opening in a scream that was both a sound and a psychic assault. Pilgrims collapsed, clutching their skulls, blood streaming from their ears. Even hardened guardsmen faltered, dropping weapons as terror clawed at their souls. Saitama blinked, unimpressed. "You're pretty loud." The daemon lunged, its claws each longer than a man's body raked toward him. The blow could have split a tank in half, yet Saitama simply raised his hand and caught the claw mid-swipe. There was a strange, almost comical pause as the daemon seemed to realize its strike had been stopped cold. Saitama yawned. Then, with a simple flick of his wrist, he sent the creature hurtling backward through 3 buildings, which crumbled like sand castles in its way. The daemon screeched as it dissolved into a mist of warp energy, its form banished back to the Immaterium. The Chaos Warband broke. Panic rippled through their ranks. Without their daemonic champion, their courage faltered. Many turned to flee back to their landing craft, while the most fanatical hurled themselves forward in suicidal frenzy, only to be cut down by Imperial fire or Saitama's unerring fists. As the last of the invaders fell silent, the battlefield became eerily still. Smoke drifted across the ruins, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the crackle of fires consuming sacred relics and banners alike. An Imperial officer, his armor scorched and bloodied, approached Saitama with trembling steps. He removed his helmet, revealing a gaunt, sweat-streaked face. His voice shook as he spoke, half prayer, half question. "My lord, are you an angel of the Emperor?" Saitama scratched the back of his head. I don't think so." The officer dropped to one knee, tears streaking his dirt-caked cheeks. "You saved us. No mortal man could stand against such horrors. You must be his chosen." Around them, other soldiers followed suit, kneeling in reverence. Even the pilgrims, still sobbing and clutching their relics, crawled forward to press their foreheads to the shattered stone. A chant began to rise, uncertain at first, then swelling with fervor. They were calling Saitama Saint, Savior, Deliverer. Saitama frowned, taking a small step back. "Hey, you don't need to do that, really." His words fell on deaf ears. Their eyes shone with feverish devotion, their voices merging into a single overwhelming wave of faith. From somewhere deep within the planet's remaining Vox towers, the transmission went out, carried on desperate static-laced signals to every neighboring system. Reports spread of a miracle warrior, who had struck down a daemon with his bare hands. Across the stars, both Imperial and heretic alike began to listen. Far above, in the warp, the Chaos Gods laughed and whispered. Korn's booming voice echoed like a war drum, hungry for battle. Tzeentch wove new schemes, threads tightening around this strange new variable. Nurgle rumbled with a sickly glee, while Slaanesh purred with dark delight. On Kaltheron, Saitama exhaled slowly, his shoulders slumping. He stared at the kneeling masses, and the ruined city around them. "This is getting weird," he muttered. Before he could say more, a piercing sound split the air, a deep resonant horn unlike any he had heard before. The ground trembled, and the sky darkened, as new ships appeared above the planet.
these marked not with chaos sigils, but the golden aquelas of the Imperium. Their arrival was not salvation, it was judgment. The golden ships descended through the ash-choked sky like judgment given form. Their vast hulls blotted out what little light pierced Caltheron's atmosphere, their engines shaking the ruined city with a deep, thunderous hum. Voxcasters erupted with blaring hymns, each note vibrating through the bones of those who heard it. The kneeling pilgrims cried out in awe and terror, voices merging into a desperate chorus as they bowed lower, foreheads pressed to the blackened stone. The soldiers followed suit, some with tears of relief, others trembling with dread. Saitama simply stared upward, his head tilted, cape fluttering in the growing wind. "Those are big," he murmured, blinking at the sheer size of the craft. Even the largest monsters he had faced in his old world felt small compared to these colossal vessels. They weren't descending to help rebuild or evacuate survivors. There was something colder in their precision, something absolute. The lead ship came to rest on a plateau just beyond the city's outskirts, its landing ramps unfolding with the groan of ancient machinery. A column of armored giants emerged, their forms gleaming with gold and ivory. These were not the ragged, terrified guardsmen Saitama had seen earlier. These warriors moved like a single, living machine, their steps shaking the earth, their bolters held with a ritualistic reverence that spoke of centuries of service. The pilgrims gasped, many sobbing outright, as they beheld the sigils upon the warriors' armor. The two-headed eagle, wings spread wide, was etched into every plate, flanked by runes of purity and battle honor. "Astartes," someone whispered, voice breaking. "Space Marines, the angels of death, saviors and destroyers in one breath." Saitama squinted, tilting his head. These guys look serious." The lead Marine stepped forward, towering even over the tallest guardsman, his voice booming through his helmet's vox amplifier. "By the authority of the Emperor and the holy writ of the Inquisition, this world is under quarantine. All surviving civilians are to be gathered and assessed. Any heresy will be purged without hesitation." The words sent ripples of fear through the crowd. Pilgrims clutched their relics tighter, whispering frantic prayer. Guardsmen stiffened, knowing what an inquisitorial decree could mean. Mass executions, entire cities burned to ash in the name of purity. The Marine's visor turned towards Saitama. Though his face was hidden, the weight of that gaze was unmistakable. "And you," he said, the tone sharp with suspicion. "Unidentified combatant. Kneel." Saitama blinked. "What?" "Kneel before the will of the Emperor," the Marine repeated, bolter lowering toward him with mechanical precision. The surrounding soldiers followed suit, forming a wall of weapons, aimed squarely at the lone figure in the crater. The pilgrims began to wail again, some pleading for mercy, others crying out that this strange warrior was their savior. Voices rose in a chaotic tide, some shouting Saitama's name, though they barely knew it, others begging the Marines to spare them. The chanting of saint and savior mingled with the cold bark of orders. Saitama scratched the back of his head. I don't really do the whole kneeling thing." The Marine's stance shifted slightly, a subtle signal to his squad. Safety catches clicked off in unison. "Then you will be brought low." Before the first shot could be fired, a guttural bone-rattling horn blast cut through the noise. From beyond the ruined gates, fresh chaos surged forth. The retreating warband had regrouped, bolstered by reinforcements, arriving under the cover of the Marines' landing. The sky filled with shrieking contrails as chaos drop pods slammed into the ground, vomiting forth hordes of screaming cultists and armored heretics. The battlefield exploded into motion once more. Bolters thundered as the Marines turned to meet the new threat, their disciplined volleys tearing through the front lines of the enemy. Guardsmen scrambled to reform ranks, while pilgrims scattered in all directions, trampled beneath the boots of warriors and the claws of mutants. Saitama sighed. "Here we go again." A chaos champion, towering and grotesque, charged through the smoke, his armor fused with living flesh, his weapon a writhing, screaming blade. He roared a challenge that shook the air. Saitama didn't bother to respond. With a single step, he vanished from sight, reappearing in front of the champion so quickly that even the Marine's enhanced eyes could barely follow. His fist struck the champion's chest with a dull final sound. The creature simply ceased to exist, its body disintegrating into a red mist that coated the broken ground. The Marines froze mid-battle. Even they, engineered to be immune to fear, faltered at the sight. A figure with no armor, no gene enhancements, no visible weapon, had just accomplished in an instant what squads of Astartes might struggle to achieve. By the throne, one Marine breathed. Saitama didn't notice. He was already moving again, his punches creating shockwaves that sent cultists flying like rag dolls. Every blow was precise, measured, almost lazy. Where he passed, the tide of chaos broke like water against an unmovable stone. The Imperials rallied around this sudden, incomprehensible force. Guardsmen fired with renewed vigor, their voices rising in battle hymns. The Marines pressed forward, their bolters singing in perfect harmony with the destruction Saitama wrought. Yet the enemy was relentless. Warp fire crackled across the field as a portal tore open, spilling demonic horrors into reality. The air itself seemed to rot, each breath burning the lungs of mortals. Pilgrims screamed and clawed at their faces, their sanity unraveling. Saitama paused for half a heartbeat, his eyes narrowing slightly. These creatures were different, not just monsters, but things that should not be. Their forms shifted with each movement, their mouths whispering promises and curses in voices that were not voices. He exhaled slowly. "All right, guess you're next." The first daemon lunged, claws dripping with warp energy. Saitama met it head-on. His fist moved and reality itself seemed to tremble. The daemon's body folded inward, collapsing into a screaming void before vanishing entirely. The portal flickered, destabilized by the blow, and began to collapse. For a moment there was silence again. The surviving chaos forces broke completely, fleeing into the ruins or throwing themselves at the Marines in mad desperation. When the last shot faded, the battlefield lay strewn with corpses and wreckage. Fires burned unchecked, casting long, twisted shadows. The stench of death was overwhelming. The lead Marine approached slowly, his bolter held low but ready. He studied Saitama for a long moment before speaking. "You wield power beyond comprehension. This is unnatural. You will come with us. The Inquisition will decide your fate." Saitama frowned. "Inquisition? That doesn't sound fun." "It is not meant to be," the Marine replied, his voice cold. Above them the golden ships shifted, their engines roaring as they prepared to lift survivors and prisoners alike. From orbit, distant flashes marked the destruction of other cities. Entire populations were being cleansed to ensure no taint of chaos remained. Saitama looked around at the kneeling pilgrims, the exhausted guardsmen, the ruined cathedrals, and the smoldering horizon. He had arrived in this world less than a day ago, and already its madness pressed against him. He exhaled, his brow furrowing slightly. "Man, what did I just get myself into?" From the shadows of a nearby ruin, unseen by mortal eyes, a ripple of laughter echoed, high, cold and cruel. The Chaos Gods were watching, and they were far from finished. The great vessels of the Imperium loomed overhead, their massive silhouettes cutting through the haze of burning cities. Entire districts had been reduced to smoking ruin during the purges, their charred remains testament to the unyielding logic of imperial doctrine. In the aftermath of the battle, the surviving population of Kelthron was gathered into makeshift camps beneath the shadow of the colossal landing craft. Pilgrims, soldiers, and refugees alike huddled together, whispering prayers, or simply staring blankly at the ground. Amid the exhaustion and terror, there was another current moving through the masses, a trembling, fevered reverence. It began as murmurs, carried on the lips of the most desperate. Those who had witnessed the lone warrior strike down demons with nothing but his fists, began to speak of him in awed, hushed tones. They called him the Emperor's Fist, the living saint, the deliverer of Kelthron. Each retelling grew grander, more miraculous. By the time the second day dawned, his image was already being shaped into legend. The Imperial forces could not contain it. Guardsmen, though sworn to silence, found themselves whispering of the strange, bald man who had stood amidst a tide of heretics and slaughtered them without breaking stride. Even a few space marines, though stoic and disciplined, exchanged terse remarks through encrypted Vox channels. No one could fully explain what they had seen, and in a galaxy ruled by faith, what could not be explained became divine. Saitama was not divine. He sat cross-legged on a broken slab of stone near the edge of the camp, staring down at his scuffed glove. Around him, people kept their distance, watching him from afar with a mixture of fear and devotion. When he looked up, they would immediately avert their eyes, bowing their heads, or whispering fervent prayers. It made him uncomfortable in a way that battles never did. He exhaled slowly, scratching his cheek. I really don't get what's going on here, he muttered to himself. He had tried, several times, to explain that he wasn't a saint or an angel. The language barrier didn't help, and even when they seemed to understand his gestures, they only took his refusal as further proof of his holiness. It was a cycle he couldn't break. The Imperial officer, who had first approached him, stood nearby, flanked by guardsmen. His armor had been polished, his expression carefully neutral, though his eyes betrayed unease. When he spoke, his words were formal, almost ritualistic. The Inquisition has heard the reports, he said, voice stiff. Your actions have been transmitted across the sector. Word spreads faster than we can contain it. Entire systems are already declaring that the Emperor has sent a new champion to stand against the heretic legions. Saitama blinked. So, people are talking about me? Yes, the officer said grimly, and that talk is dangerous. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another figure. This one was different, his presence colder, more precise. He wore dark robes, over segmented carapace armor, his chest emblazoned with a stylized. His eyes were hidden behind a mask of polished brass, and servo skulls hovered around him like carrion birds. Every soldier nearby stiffened to rigid attention. Even the space marines turned their heads slightly in acknowledgement. The officer knelt, inquisitor. The newcomer regarded Saitama in silence for a long, unsettling moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but carried with undeniable authority. This is the one they call the living saint? Yes, my lord, the officer replied. He struck down the daemon, and shattered the enemy host. The people are irrelevant, the Inquisitor snapped, cutting him off. His gaze never left Saitama. What matters is truth, and truth is best found through fire. Saitama tilted his head. You're not very friendly, huh? The Inquisitor took a slow step forward. Do you claim allegiance to the Emperor of Mankind? Saitama considered the question. I don't know who that is. The officer's face paled. The nearby soldiers murmured nervously, some making the sign of the Aquila over their chests. To them, such ignorance was blasphemy. The Inquisitor, however, remained calm. Fascinating, he murmured. You arrive in our hour of need, wielding power beyond comprehension, yet you do not know his name. That leaves two possibilities. You are a gift, or you are a threat. Saitama shrugged. I just punched some bad guys, that's all. To you perhaps, the Inquisitor said, his tone like a blade's edge. But to this world, to this entire sector, you are a symbol. Symbols can inspire faith, or rebellion. If you are a false prophet, your very existence could damn millions. Before Saitama could respond, the camp was thrown into chaos. A Vox alarm blared from the landing craft, its mechanical voice barking warnings in clipped binary tones. Soldiers scrambled, weapons raised, the air filled with the sound of distant engines, and guttural chanting. The Inquisitor's head snapped toward the horizon. Chaos reinforcements, he hissed. Through the ash-clouded sky came new shapes, crude, jagged ships descending fast. The ground shook as drop pods slammed into the outskirts of the camp, splitting open to reveal fresh hordes of cultists and traitor marines. Their howls rose like a single monstrous voice, shaking the faithful to their knees. The Inquisitor drew a plasma pistol, and a wickedly curved blade. Contain them, kill any who flee, let none fall to corruption. Saitama rose to his feet with a sigh. Guess talking time's over. He moved faster than any of them could see, appearing amidst the enemy before their first shot was fired. His punch tore through the leading wave, bodies and armor scattering like leaves before a storm. A daemon prince, towering and vile, emerged from a warp rift, its laughter echoing like madness. Saitama didn't even slow down. One strike, and the creature was gone, the rift snapping shut with a deafening pop. The Imperials faltered, their chants dying in their throats. Even the Inquisitor paused mid-swing, staring at the destruction with something like disbelief. Then slowly, he lowered his blade. "Sent," he breathed. It was not reverent, nor was it mocking. It was simply a word given weight by necessity. Above them, the Vox relays captured the image and transmitted it outward. Across the sector, worlds at war received fragments of a message. A lone warrior standing amid the ashes, surrounded by the broken corpses of daemons and heretics. On some planets, the people fell to their knees and praised the Emperor for sending his champion. On others, whispers of rebellion spread. Heretics, claiming a new god, had risen to challenge the Imperium itself. In the warp, the Chaos Gods stirred, their laughter mingling with hunger and rage. A new piece had entered their game, and already the board was shifting. Saitama looked at the kneeling soldiers and wide-eyed civilians, rubbing the back of his head. "They really need to find a way home," he muttered.
But above the planet, aboard the golden ships, the Inquisition had already made its decision. This strange, unstoppable man would not be allowed to wander free. He would be captured, studied, and used, or destroyed. And as the transmissions spread like wildfire, Saitama's name was no longer his own. Across the stars, countless voices spoke it, reshaping it into prayer and prophecy. A name had been forged in blood and fire, and it was a name that neither the Imperium nor the ruinous powers would ever forget. The air within the command sanctum was heavy with the scent of oil, incense, and scorched metal. Flickering lumen globes cast pale light across the vaulted chamber, their glow revealing gilded statues of the Emperor gazing down with hollow, unblinking eyes. Servo skulls drifted silently overhead, their mechanical wings humming softly as they recorded every word, every breath. Soldiers lined the walls, their rifles held ready, their stances rigid. None dared move or even glance at the figure standing at the center of the room. Saitama stood there quietly, arms folded, his posture relaxed, despite the tension filling the chamber like a drawn blade. His simple yellow suit and flowing white cape looked absurdly out of place amidst the ornate armor and ceremonial trappings of the Imperium. He seemed unaffected by the squad of elite stormtroopers, with weapons trained squarely on his chest, or the subtle hum of power fields ready to vaporize him at a moment's notice. His eyes wandered curiously, as though he were simply waiting in line at a grocery store. The Inquisitor entered without fanfare, though his mere presence silenced the room. His dark robes swept the ground as he approached, the stylized sigil of the Inquisition glinting coldly on his breastplate. Servo skulls trailed in his wake, their hollow eye sockets glowing red. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "You are not of this galaxy," he said, each word deliberate, measured. "You wield power that defies all known laws of the Imperium, and yet you claim no allegiance to the Emperor or his enemy." His head tilted slightly, studying Saitama with the keen precision of a predator. "Do you understand the position you are in?" Saitama blinked slowly. Not really. I just woke up here, and people keep trying to kneel or shoot me. It's been kind of a weird day." A ripple of discomfort moved through the assembled soldiers. Even the stormtroopers shifted slightly, their fingers tightening on their triggers. The Inquisitor, however, remained perfectly still. "You have caused a fracture," he continued. "Already, entire systems are interpreting your actions as divine intervention. Faith in the Emperor's plan has been disrupted. Some believe you are his chosen hand. Others whisper that you are a false idol sent by the ruinous powers. Such division can destroy worlds." Saitama tilted his head. "Sounds like a communication problem. Maybe just tell them I'm not a god." "You think it is that simple?" The Inquisitor's tone sharpened like a blade. "Faith is the lifeblood of the Imperium. It cannot be reasoned with. It cannot be undone with mere words. You are no longer merely a man. You are a symbol, and symbols must either be wielded or destroyed." The tension in the room deepened. Soldiers held their breath. The sound of distant machinery throbbed faintly through the walls, like a heartbeat. Saitama scratched the back of his head, clearly unimpressed. So, what, you're gonna kill me? The Inquisitor's eyes, hidden behind his brass mask, gleamed faintly. If I wished to kill you, we would not be speaking. No, I am offering you a choice. Serve the Imperium. Fight under my command against the enemies of mankind. In return, I will protect you from the wrath of those who would see you executed or enslaved. Saitama considered this for a moment. And if I say no? The Inquisitor's voice grew cold. Then I will mark you as heretic, and unleash the full fury of the Imperium upon you. Every guardsman, every space marine, every inquisitorial agent will hunt you without rest, until you are nothing but a name whispered in fear. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Even the stormtroopers shifted uncomfortably, as though they too were wary of provoking the strange, calm man in front of them. Saitama sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. Man, that sounds like a lot of trouble. It is the only path forward. The Inquisitor said, chaos has taken notice of you. Even now, the warp stirs with whispers of your existence. If you remain free, you will be seized by them, twisted into a weapon against us. Whether you wish it or not, you will shape the fate of entire sectors. As if summoned by his words, the chamber lights flickered. A chill swept through the air, unnatural and biting. Several servo skulls dropped from the sky, their mechanisms screeching as if in pain. In the distant corners of the room, shadowy shapes seemed to ripple, whispering words that no mortal tongue could form. The Inquisitor turned his masked face toward the darkness. Do you feel it? Even here, they reach for you. The ruinous powers are already plotting to claim you. His hand dropped to the hilt of his blade, knuckles tightening. Join me, and we will turn their schemes to ash. Saitama glanced at the writhing shadows, his brow furrowing faintly. Those things again, he muttered. They're kinda annoying. Annoying. The Inquisitor's voice trembled with incredulity. They are the embodiment of madness and destruction. They are the end of all things. Yeah, but they don't seem that tough, Saitama said casually. The soldiers gasped. One even crossed himself, murmuring a prayer of absolution. The Inquisitor, however, remained silent for a long, tense moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more dangerous. Your arrogance will be your undoing. Even the mightiest of heroes fall before the warp if they lack vigilance. Saitama didn't respond. His gaze had drifted back toward the door, where faint screams could be heard beyond the walls. Somewhere outside, a battle was raging. The Inquisitor followed his glance. Another cultist uprising, he said, his tone almost bored. They rise like vermin, no matter how many we crush. Saitama's eyes narrowed slightly. They're hurting people. Yes, the Inquisitor said, and they will keep hurting people until they are burned from existence. That is why you must serve. With your strength, we could end rebellions before they begin. Worlds could be saved, billions of lives spared. The offer hung between them like a blade over a prisoner's neck. For a moment, even the machine seemed to fall silent, as if the entire room was holding its breath. Finally, Saitama spoke, his voice quiet but steady. I don't care about your empire. I just don't like seeing people get hurt. The Inquisitor tilted his head. Then our goals align. Serve me, and you will have all the enemies you could ever wish to fight. But know this, the moment you turn against the Imperium, I will burn you from existence, no matter the cost. Saitama's gaze met the Inquisitor's masked stare. In that instant, something unspoken passed between them, a silent acknowledgement that both understood this was not trust, only necessity. Outside, the distant sounds of battle grew louder. The chamber doors shuddered as if struck by a massive force. The Inquisitor straightened, his voice cutting through the rising chaos. Decide quickly. Chaos comes for us all, and they will not wait for bargains. Saitama exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. Fine, I'll help you. For now. The Inquisitor's masked face gave no sign of emotion, but there was a subtle shift in his stance, a predator's satisfaction, hidden beneath the surface. Then rise, champion of the Imperium. Your war begins today. Even as he spoke, the doors burst inward, and the first wave of cultists flooded into the sanctum, their eyes blazing with madness, their voices shrieking the names of dark gods. Saitama's fists clenched, his cape stirring in the sudden rush of foul wind. The bargain had been struck,
and the galaxy would never be the same. The cultists poured into the sanctum like a living tide, their bodies twisted by devotion and mutation, their mouths spilling guttural chants of praise to gods that hungered beyond comprehension. Some carried jagged, improvised weapons dripping with ichor, while others brandished relics of rusted metal and bone, their very presence seething with corruption. The air thickened with the stench of burnt flesh and old blood, and the shadows themselves seemed to writhe in unholy ecstasy. Saitama moved before the stormtroopers could fire a single shot. One moment he stood still, his expression faintly annoyed, and the next he was among the cultists, fists blurring faster than the eye could follow. Bodies burst apart like fragile clay figures, screams cutting off into wet silence. Each strike reverberated through the chamber, shaking stone and metal, until the initial wave of attackers was nothing more than a pile of broken limbs and crimson mist. The soldiers stared, stunned into silence. Even the Inquisitor did not speak for a long moment, his masked face turned towards Saitama, as though trying to decipher what he had just witnessed. Saitama shook his hands slightly, as though flicking off dust, then glanced back at the Inquisitor. "These guys are kind of squishy," he said with mild disappointment. Before anyone could respond, a sound rose from beyond the chamber, not the sound of mortal voices or weapons, but something far worse. It was a whisper at first, so faint it might have been mistaken for the wind. Then it grew, swelling into a chorus of thousands, then millions, each voice overlapping in an incomprehensible symphony. The walls trembled, servo skulls fell from the air, their optics bursting in showers of sparks. The Inquisitor stiffened. "The warp," he hissed, drawing his blade once more. "They are reaching for us." The lumen globes flickered wildly, plunging the chamber into stuttering darkness. Shapes moved within the shadows, impossibly tall figures with too many limbs, their forms indistinct and shifting like smoke. The air grew icy, and a pressure settled over the room, crushing and oppressive, as though some vast creature were leaning down to peer through a crack in reality. Saitama frowned. "Oh, it's these things again. This is no mere incursion," the Inquisitor said, his voice low and urgent. "Something greater is watching, something vast." He turned sharply to his stormtroopers. "Seal the inner doors, purge all unclean relics. No matter what happens, this sanctum must not fall." The troopers obeyed instantly, their boots pounding against the stone, as they moved to carry out his commands. But even as they worked, the chanting outside grew louder, more frenzied. The very air seemed to burn with invisible fire, each breath like inhaling acid. Beyond the broken gates, a rift began to form. It started as a hairline crack of violet light, humming with malignant energy. Then it widened, tearing open with a deafening roar, until it was a gaping wound in the fabric of space itself. From its depths poured daemons, grotesque, writhing creatures of nightmare, their shapes flickering between solid and ethereal, their mouths filled with endless rows of teeth. The first of the daemons surged forward, shrieking praises to their master. The stormtroopers opened fire in disciplined volleys, their hellguns cutting down the front ranks. But for every creature destroyed, two more emerged from the rift, their bodies knitting together from warp stuff, as fast as they were torn apart. Saitama stepped forward calmly, rolling his shoulders. "Guess I better close that thing." He vanished in a blur of speed, reappearing at the edge of the rift. The daemons swarmed him instantly, claws and fangs flashing in the warped light. He struck once, and the entire front wave disintegrated, collapsing into a fine mist of unreality. Then he struck again, faster than thought, each punch resonating through the warp itself. The rift buckled under the assault, its edges trembling. For a heartbeat, it seemed as though Saitama might actually close it through sheer physical force. But then the voices rose to a deafening crescendo, and something far greater than the daemons began to emerge. The chamber shook violently, stone cracking, statues toppling. A massive claw dripping with black ichor pushed through the rift, followed by a horned head wreathed in fire. The creature that stepped through was no mere daemon. It was an avatar of one of the chaos gods, its form too immense to fully comprehend. Its presence alone sent mortals screaming, their minds splintering beneath the weight of its reality. The Inquisitor staggered back, his blade raised in defiance. "A greater daemon," he breathed, his voice nearly breaking. "By the throne, they send one of their champions." The creature's many mouths opened in a single unified laugh, a sound that clawed at the soul, its eyes fixed on Saitama, glowing with recognition, and then, impossibly, it spoke. The mortal without a master, it intoned, its voice echoing across the chamber and through the warp itself. The one who defies all limits. The gods have seen you, little man. They hunger for you. Saitama tilted his head slightly. You guys talk a lot. The creature lunged, its massive claw descending like a falling mountain. Saitama met it with a simple upward punch. The impact was cataclysmic. The entire chamber shook, stone pillars collapsing, walls shattering outward. The daemon reeled back, its claw shattered into fragments of burning warp mat. The Inquisitor watched in stunned silence, as Saitama advanced step by step, each strike driving the daemon backward toward the rift. The monster howled in rage and fear, unleashing torrents of warp fire that melted stone and steel alike. Saitama walked through the storm unscathed, his cape fluttering lazily behind him. With one final punch, he struck the daemon squarely in the chest. Its body imploded, collapsing into nothingness. The rift shuddered violently, then sealed itself with a thunderous crack, leaving only silence and a lingering stench of sulfur. The stormtroopers fell to their knees, some sobbing, others whispering prayers of gratitude. The Inquisitor alone remained standing, though his breathing was ragged beneath his mask. But the silence did not last. From the warp came a sound, soft yet unmistakable, laughter. It was not the laughter of a single entity, but four voices woven into one, each distinct yet united. It rolled through the chamber like a tide, seeping into the walls, into the hearts of every living being present. The Inquisitor went pale beneath his mask. They are watching him, he whispered. Wolf, Korn, Tzeentch, Nurgle, Slaanesh. They have never focused their gaze so fully on one soul. Saitama glanced around, scratching his cheek. Thought I heard something. The Inquisitor turned sharply to him, his tone a mixture of awe and fear. You don't understand. This was not an attack. It was a test. They now know your strength, and they will not stop until they possess you. As if to prove his words, the distant sky rumbled with unnatural thunder. The warp stirred like a storm on the horizon, its tendrils stretching toward reality. Saitama looked upward, his face calm but unreadable. Sounds like more troubles coming. The Inquisitor's hands tightened around his blade. Trouble? No, this is war. And in the unseen depths of the warp, four vast presences leaned closer, whispering and plotting, their schemes intertwining. For the first time in millennia the Chaos Gods were united, and their prize was a man who had no master, no fear, and no limit. The ruins of Caltheron smoldered like the dying embers of a funeral pyre. From orbit, the planet looked as though it had been scoured by fire and claw, its cities nothing more than broken teeth, jutting from a wasteland of ash. Above it, the golden warships of the Imperium hung silent, their weapons locked in grim readiness, each vessel a cathedral of destruction bristling with cannon and lance batteries. The warp storm that had briefly torn reality open still lingered at the planet's edge, a malignant scar of violet clouds and whispering lightning. Saitama stood at the heart of it all, surrounded by the remnants of a world barely holding together. His cape fluttered lazily in the acrid breeze as he stared down at the fractured ground where the rift had been sealed. Around him, Imperial forces worked tirelessly to restore order. Guardsmen moved in rigid formations, dragging bodies to mass pyres and chanting purification rites as they burned the dead. The smoke was thick and greasy, carrying the mingled stench of flesh and incense. The Inquisitor stood beside Saitama, his mask reflecting the glow of the fire. His voice was quiet but unyielding. You see now the scale of what we face. These creatures, these servants of the warp, they will return, and they will bring more. If you wish to help, if you truly wish to protect the innocent, you must be forged into a weapon the Imperium can wield. Saitama tilted his head. You mean, training? The Inquisitor's tone was sharp, almost mocking. Training? No, trial. He gestured toward a towering bulk of movement on the horizon. From the mist marched a company of space marines, their armor, a burnished bronze streaked with purity seals and battle scars. Each warrior was a living fortress, their bolters held like sacred relics. Their mere presence caused mortal soldiers to fall silent, some dropping to their knees in awe. These are the Astartes of the Iron Requiem, the Inquisitor said. They do not trust you. They have seen your power, but they do not understand it. If you are to fight beside them, you must prove yourself in battle, not merely against cultists or lesser daemons, but against the true horrors that haunt this galaxy. Saitama watched the towering warriors approach. They look pretty serious. They are more than serious, the Inquisitor replied. They are the Emperor's wrath, made flesh, and they will not accept you until you stand in the fire beside them. The lead Space Marine stepped forward, his helmet marked by a single vertical stripe of black. When he spoke, his voice boomed from his vox grill like the tolling of a great bell. Inquisitor Verax, we are ready. His visor turned toward Saitama, the weight of his scrutiny almost physical. So this is the so-called living saint. He does not look like much. Saitama scratched the back of his head. Yeah, I get that a lot. The Marine's stance did not shift. Then let us see what lies beneath that plain appearance. The enemy has entrenched itself in the ruins of Hive Barathrum. Traitor Astartes and their daemon kin hold the spy. Our orders are to purge them. Saitama frowned. Purge, huh? Sounds violent. It will be, the Marine said simply. They marched at dawn, though the sun was little more than a dull red smear through the choking ash cloud. The Iron Requiem moved with perfect precision, their footsteps like the measured beat of a war drum. Saitama walked among them, his casual gait in stark contrast to their rigid formation. The mortal guardsmen followed behind, their banners trailing, their faces set in grim determination. As they approached the hive, the scale of the enemy's corruption became clear. Once the spire had been a glittering monument to imperial industry, its towers reaching toward the heavens. Now it was a blackened wound in the landscape, its walls daubed with symbols of chaos, its streets crawling with cultists and mutated beasts. The air grew heavy with the psychic pressure of the war. Whispers gnawed at the minds of the soldiers, promises of glory and despair mingling until the line between the two blurred. Several guardsmen faltered, clutching their heads and screaming before being dragged back into formation. The lead Marine raised his hand, signaling the whole. Brothers, he intoned, his voice carrying across the ruined field. We stand upon the threshold of damnation. Let none falter, let none question. The Emperor watches, and his will is absolute. A guttural roar answered him from within the hive. The gates burst open, and the enemy poured forth. Traitor Marines clad in jagged, corrupted armor led the charge, their bolters spitting hellish fire. Behind them surged a tide of cultists and daemons, their bodies twisting as they screamed praises to Dark God. The Iron Requiem responded with perfect unity. Bolters roared in disciplined volleys, each shot a hymn of death. Mortals followed their lead, lachans snapping in ragged but determined patterns. The battlefield became a maelstrom of smoke, fire and blood. Saitama stood still for a moment, watching as the two sides clashed. The sheer chaos of it all was staggering, a level of war unlike anything he had known. He saw soldiers cut down and trampled underfoot, saw daemons devouring the living, saw Space Marines locked in brutal melee with their corrupted kin. He sighed softly. Guess that's my cue. He moved. In an instant the front line buckled. Traitor Marines vanished in sprays of shattered armor and gore. Daemons screamed as they were unmade by blows they could not comprehend. Cultists fled in blind panic, only to be caught and destroyed before they could escape. The Iron Requiem faltered for a heartbeat, their formation wavering as they tried to process what they were seeing. Then their commander roared, rallying them. Forward, by the Emperor, forward. Together, they surged into the hive, Saitama at their center like a living weapon. The spire's corridors became killing grounds. Blood ran in rivers down its broken stairways. The walls shook as Saitama's strikes shattered daemon and heretic alike. But as they reached the inner sanctum, the true enemy revealed itself. A massive figure stepped from the shadows, its armor a grotesque parody of the Imperium's glory. Horns jutted from its helm, and its voice was a guttural growl. Intruders, it snarled, you dare defile our stronghold. The commander spat a curse. Chaos Lord. This battle will not end until his head is taken. The Chaos Lord charged, his weapon a massive axe glowing with unholy fire. The Marines met him, their blows striking like thunder, but he cast them aside with contemptuous strength. Then Saitama stepped forward. The Lord swung his axe, the impact shaking the chamber. Saitama caught the blade with one hand. It didn't move. The Chaos Lord's eyes widened in disbelief. Saitama's fist blurred. The Lord was gone. Only a crater remained where he had stood. The battle ended in that moment. The remaining heretics broke, fleeing into the lower tunnels, or throwing themselves at the Marines in desperate fury. The Iron Requiem pressed the attack, purging the last pockets of resistance with bolter and blade. When the smoke cleared, the hive was silent, save for the crackle of fires and the hiss of cooling metal. The Marines stood amid the carnage, their armor scarred, their breaths heavy. Slowly, one by one, they turned towards Saitama. The commander stepped forward, his voice low but clear. "You are not of us, not of this galaxy, but today you have stood in the fire and not faltered. By the Emperor's will we name you ally." Saitama rubbed the back of his head, looking faintly embarrassed. Thanks I guess." The Inquisitor's voice cut through the moment, cold and sharp. "This victory will echo across the sector. The enemy will not take this insult lightly. They will come again, and next time they will come for him." In the warp above, unseen by mortal eyes, 4 vast powers stirred, their laughter mingling with the screams of the dying. The trial was over. The true war was only beginning. The silence after battle was always strange. It was not true quiet, for the world still groaned beneath the weight of destruction. Fires hissed and spat as they consumed the bodies of heretics. The ruined hive still trembled from deep structural collapses, and the wounded moaned softly, where they lay awaiting the mercy of a field medic or the Emperor's relief. Yet, compared to the cacophony of war, it felt as though the universe had drawn a long shuddering breath, and now held it. Saitama sat alone on the shattered steps of what had once been a cathedral at the heart of Hive Barathra. Its spire had been toppled during the battle, lying broken across the square like the corpse of some massive beast. His cape was torn, the edge singed from stray blasts of warp fire, but he didn't seem to know. His elbows rested on his knees as he stared at the distant horizon, where the ash clouds glowed faintly with reflected fires. Around him, the Iron Requiem and Mortal Guardsmen worked to secure the area. Orders were barked in sharp, precise tone. Purification rites were recited over the dead, and the soon-to-be dead alike. Pilgrims crawled from hiding places, whispering frantic prayers of thanks. When they saw the Space Marines standing tall and unbroken, they cast furtive, reverent glances at Saitama, their voices trembling as they spoke of him in tones that made him deeply uncomfortable. He could hear them even from across the square, voices calling him a savior, a saint, a sign of the Emperor's boundless will. He sighed, rubbing the back of his head. Back home people rarely noticed him. Even after saving entire cities, they treated him like some random guy in a hero costume, unremarkable and forgettable. He'd grown used to it, maybe even liked it. But here, in this brutal world of faith and fear, they wouldn't stop staring at him as though he was some kind of god. His eyes drifted downward to a small piece of rubble at his feet, a fragment of marble carved with the image of a winged figure. He turned it over in his hand, tracing the grooves absently. It reminded him, faintly, of the statues in his own city's parks. Ziyat City, with its bustling streets and garish neon signs, felt impossibly far away now. "Man," he murmured, "I didn't think I'd miss that old grocery store." The memory rose unbidden, the mundane routine of shopping for sales, the bland faces of cashiers, who didn't care who he was, the quiet of his apartment, with nothing but a leaky faucet for company. It was so ordinary, so painfully dull. He had always thought he wanted excitement, purpose, a challenge worthy of his strength. But now, sitting amid the bones of a dead world, he realized how precious that dullness had been. A shadow fell over him. He looked up to see the Inquisitor standing there, his brass mask glinting in the firelight. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the Inquisitor's voice cut through the smoky air, calm and measured. "You seem distracted," he said. Saitama shrugged. "Just thinking." "About what?" "Home," Saitama answered simply. The Inquisitor tilted his head. "Your world must be very different from this one." "Yeah," Saitama said with a small humorless laugh. "Nobody there worships me. For starters." He gestured vaguely, toward a group of pilgrims kneeling nearby, their hands clasped tightly as they prayed to him rather than the Emperor. "Back home, I was just some guy who bought discounted leeks on Saturdays." The Inquisitor regarded him in silence for a moment before speaking. "Perhaps that is why you are dangerous." Saitama blinked. "Huh, You are a blank canvas, the Inquisitor said. In a galaxy defined by faith and fear, such a thing is unthinkable. The people will project their desires upon you. To some you are salvation incarnate, to others, a threat to be destroyed. Even the ruinous powers see in you a tool to reshape reality. His voice lowered, becoming almost a whisper. It is only a matter of time before they strike again. Saitama looked back toward the horizon, where the ash clouds twisted in unnatural patterns. They already have, haven't they? Those voices I keep hearing, they're getting louder. The Inquisitor's hands tightened behind his back. You hear them clearly? Yeah, Saitama said, rubbing his temple. It's like they're trying to talk to me. Promise me stuff, fight me. It's annoying. The Inquisitor's tone darkened. That is no mere annoyance. It means the warp has taken hold of your presence. Even now they are shaping stories about you. My spies have intercepted broadcasts from 3 neighboring systems. They speak of you as a new messiah, or a new dark god, as if summoned by his words. A distant explosion echoed across the ruin. Both men turned sharply to see a plume of black smoke rising from one of the lower hive districts. A Vox officer sprinted toward them, his face pale, his voice trembling, as he shouted into his comm bead. Cultist uprising, he cried, thousands of them. They're chanting his name. Saitama's eyes widened. My name. The Inquisitor's tone was ice cold. This is what I warned you of. Your very existence is destabilizing this sector. Even now chaos moves to twist your image into a weapon.
From the streets below came a hideous sound, countless voices screaming in unison, chanting a single word that echoed like a drumbeat. Saitama. Saitama. It was frenzied, ecstatic, violent. Saitama rose slowly to his feet, his face unreadable. I didn't ask for this, he said quietly. No one ever does, the Inquisitor replied. The chanting grew louder, closer. Through the smoke, the first wave of cultists appeared, their bodies painted with crude symbols, their eyes glowing with madness. They surged forward, blades flashing, their shrieks drowning out all other sound. The iron requiem moved instantly, bolters roaring, their formation locking like the teeth of a steel trap. Lascans spat red beams into the charging horde. Mortals screamed and died by the dozen, but still they came, driven by a faith so dark and absolute it defied reason. Saitama stood at the front, his fists clenched. For a heartbeat he hesitated. Not out of fear, but because he remembered something from home, a young boy who had once asked him why he wanted to be a hero. His answer then had been simple: to save people. That's all. The boy's face blurred in his memory, replaced by the ash-streaked faces of this world's pilgrims. They looked at him the same way. Even if they didn't understand him, he stepped forward. The first cultist reached him, screaming his name. Saitama's punch ended the scream, and the one after that, and the one after that. His movements were fluid, effortless, each strike breaking the tide like a wave against rock. But there were so many of them, and with every one he struck down, more seemed to rise. Behind him, the Inquisitor watched with a mixture of awe and calculation. You see, he murmured to himself, even as he saves them, he becomes their idol. Even as he destroys their enemies, he feeds the very faith that will destroy us all. The battle raged on, and Saitama moved through it like a storm. Yet somewhere beneath the clash of bolter fire and screams, he heard another sound, faint, almost forgotten. It was the memory of home, the chatter of a crowded street, the soft hum of fluorescent lights in his apartment, the distant cry of a vendor hawking vegetables. For just a moment, amid the blood and fire, he closed his eyes and let himself remember. Then the noise of war dragged him back, and he opened them again to a world that would never be simple, never be peaceful, never be home. He exhaled softly, and kept fighting. The chanting did not stop when the last cultist fell. Even as Saitama lowered his fists and looked over the field of broken bodies, the echo of his name seemed to linger in the smoke-choked air, carried on voices that were no longer present. It was as if the very world had learned to whisper it, the sound coming from the cracked stones beneath his feet and the shattered towers looming above. The battlefield reeked of burned flesh and warp-tainted blood. the stench so thick it clung to the back of the throat. Pilgrims huddled behind barricades, staring at him with a mix of reverence and terror, their eyes wide and shining in the dim light. Saitama stared back at them, unmoved. He wanted to tell them to stop looking at him like that, to go home, to live their lives without dragging him into whatever this war was. But there were no homes left here, only ruins. There was no normal life to return to, and judging by the way they clutched their relics and muttered prayers, he doubted they would hear him even if he spoke. Behind him, the iron requiem moved with mechanical precision, policing the battlefield. They executed the wounded heretics with bolter fire, each shot accompanied by a curt prayer. No hesitation, no mercy. The cultists were not viewed as misguided mortals, but as extensions of the chaos that had to be purged. Saitama watched one young soldier flinch as a marine's bolt round blew apart the skull of a woman who moments earlier had been screaming his name. The boy turned away gagging, but a sergeant barked at him until he stood straight again. Harsh, Saitama muttered under his breath. The Inquisitor's voice came from behind him, quiet yet cutting through the noise like a blade. Necessary. Mercy is a luxury this galaxy cannot afford. Saitama didn't look at him. Kinda sounds like an excuse to me. Call it what you will. The Inquisitor replied. Faith is our weapon, and fear is our shield. Without them mankind would have perished millennia ago. Saitama turned slightly, his expression flat but his voice edged with irritation. Faith? These people are just scared. They're desperate. They keep praying to me, and I don't even know what to do about it. The Inquisitor's mask gleamed in the firelight as he stepped closer. You are what they need you to be. It does not matter what you truly are. Do you not see, even now, their devotion grows? When they chant your name, they are not merely speaking, they are binding you, shaping you. Every whispered prayer is a chain. Saitama frowned. Chains? Yes, the Inquisitor gestured to the kneeling pilgrims. Belief is the most powerful force in the galaxy. The Chaos Gods are proof of that. They are nothing but the sum of mortal thoughts, fears and desires given form. If these people continue to worship you, you will become something more than a man, and something far less. Their faith will twist you into a symbol, and symbols cannot act freely. They are shackled to the expectations of those who believe. Saitama stared at the pilgrims. A small child had crawled forward, pressing a cracked wooden charm to the ground before him. The boy's lips moved silently, eyes closed in desperate prayer. Saitama had saved countless people before, but none of them had ever bowed to him like this. Back home, no one had ever expected him to be anything more than a hero. Here, they didn't even see him as human. I didn't ask for this, he said softly. No one asks for chains, the Inquisitor replied, but they are forged all the same. His voice dropped lower, becoming almost conspiratorial. This is why I sought to bring you under Imperial control. If we guide their faith, we can shape it, direct it. If we do not, chaos will seize it. Even now, cults rise on distant worlds, claiming you as their champion. Some call you the Emperor Reborn. Others declare you a new god of fists and destruction. There are whispers that you are a test sent by the ruinous powers themselves. Saitama rubbed his forehead, sighing. So no matter what I do, people are gonna twist it, huh? Yes, the Inquisitor said. That is the nature of this galaxy. Faith is a double-edged sword. It sustains us, but it also devours. A sudden commotion rippled through the ranks. A group of pilgrims, frenzied and wild-eyed, broke past the guardsmen trying to contain them. They ran straight toward Saitama, throwing themselves at his feet. Their leader, a gaunt man with blood smeared across his face, raised his arms and screamed, "Deliverer, smite the false priests, cast down the Emperor's tyrants, lead us to freedom." The guardsmen immediately turned their rifles on the group. The iron requiem shifted as well, bolters humming with barely restrained power. "Heretics," the Marine commander growled. Saitama stepped between the kneeling pilgrims and the Marines without thinking. "Hey, hold on," he said, holding up a hand. "They're just scared." The Inquisitor's voice cut through his words like a knife. "They are chaos-tainted. Look at them. They are beyond saving." The gaunt man clutched Saitama's leg, sobbing. "No, we serve you, Deliverer.
not the corpse on terror. You are our god. The words hit like a physical blow. The surrounding crowd erupted, some screaming in agreement, others shrieking prayers to the emperor in defiance. The fragile order shattered in an instant. Guardsmen turned their guns on fellow citizens. Pilgrims clawed at each other, their faith weaponized into violence. The Marines fired without hesitation. Bolter rounds ripped through the air, tearing apart bodies by the dozen. The screams of the dying drowned out everything else. Saitama stood frozen for a heartbeat, his mind flashing back to another crowd, another time, ordinary people laughing and arguing on a bustling street back home. That world felt impossibly distant now. His fists clenched. "Enough," he said quietly. The word was soft, but it cut through the chaos like a thunderclap. Everyone stopped. Even the Marines hesitated, their weapons lowering slightly. Saitama turned to the Inquisitor, his face calm, but his eyes hard. "You said faith is a chain. I think you're right, but maybe I don't need to wear it." The Inquisitor's tone was cold, measured. "If you refuse to play your role, you will doom these people. Chaos thrives in the vacuum left by abandoned faith. You will not free them. You will only leave them prey to darker masters." Saitama didn't answer. Instead, he walked past the Inquisitor, stepping through the carnage toward the burning ruins beyond. The crowd parted in stunned silence, unsure whether to reach for him or recoil in fear. As he disappeared into the smoke, the Inquisitor's masked gaze followed him. His voice was low, almost to himself. "He thinks he walks free, but every step he takes forges another chain, and soon, those chains will drag him into the abyss." Far above, in the cold void beyond the world's atmosphere, the warp shift. 4 voices whispered as one, their laughter echoing across the Immaterium. The game was unfolding perfectly, and their newest piece was already moving exactly where they wanted. The ash winds howled through the broken streets, sweeping over the ruins of Caltheron, like the breath of some vast and unseen predator. Saitama walked alone, his boots crunching softly over blackened stone and shattered relic. Behind him, the distant sounds of imperial order being re-established barked commands, weeping pilgrims. The sharp bark of last fire executions faded into the background. Ahead lay only silence, and a horizon glowing faintly red, as if the very sky were bleeding. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't care. Each step took him further from the kneeling crowds and their fervent whispers. He didn't want to be their savior, their symbol, or their weapon. All he wanted was the same simple thing he had always wanted: to protect people, and maybe, one day, find a worthy fight. But here, that simple wish felt impossibly complicated, twisted by faith and fear, until he couldn't tell whether he was saving anyone, or just making things worse. His thoughts were interrupted by a low, guttural sound that rolled through the ruins like distant thunder. Saitama stopped, tilting his head. It wasn't an explosion or a collapsing structure. It was rhythmic, like the beating of a great war drum. Then came the second sound, metal scraping against metal, growing louder with each pulse of that unseen drumbeat. The sky darkened. The air grew heavy, hot, oppressive, carrying with it the stink of blood and smoke. Whispers rode the wind. Words Saitama couldn't understand, but instinctively recognized as hostile. Even without knowing the language, he felt the intent behind them: rage, hunger, glory and destruction. He turned slowly, scanning the ruins. At first, there was nothing. Then, from the heart of the collapsed spire, a figure emerged. It was massive, easily twice the height of the tallest space marine, its bulk clad in brutal spiked armor, the color of dried blood. Chains draped across its shoulders, each link etched with runes that seemed to writhe when looked at too closely. In one hand, it carried a colossal axe, its blade jagged and slick with fresh gore. The weapon pulsed like a living thing, whispering in 1,000 hateful voices. The figure stopped, its presence so overwhelming that even the howling winds seemed to falter. It raised its head, and beneath the horned helm, a pair of eyes glowed like molten coals. When it spoke, the words were not merely heard, They struck the mind like a hammer blow. Mortal without master. It rumbled, its voice deep enough to shake the ruins around them. The blood god has seen you. Your strength defies reason. Your defiance stinks of pride. I am sent to claim you. Saitama blinked. Blood god, that sounds gross. The towering warrior tilted its head, as if puzzled by the calmness of the reply. Then it laughed, a sound like iron grinding against bone. You are fearless. Good. Khorne values only battle. Fear has no place here. I am Skargrath, the gore-born champion of Khorne, scourge of 1,000 battlefields. I have slain angels and daemon princes. I have drowned worlds in blood, and now I will break you. Saitama sighed. You guys really like introductions, huh? The champion roared and charged. The ground shook with every step, each one leaving craters in the stone. His axe came down in a blazing arc, trailing a comet tail of warp fire. Saitama didn't move until the very last instant. He raised his hand and caught the blade between two fingers. For a moment, the battlefield froze. The whispering voices from the axe screamed in confusion. Skargrath's glowing eyes widened. Impossible, the champion growled. Saitama tilted his head. This thing's kinda heavy. Then he flicked his wrist. The colossal axe spun away like a toy, embedding itself in a distant tower, with a sound like a collapsing mountain. Skargrath roared again, lunging with his bare hands. The two titans clashed in a storm of motion. Skargrath's fists were the size of boulders, each blow capable of crushing tanks. Saitama met them with casual precision, blocking, dodging, and occasionally striking back with punches that shattered armor like porcelain. The very air quaked with the force of their battle. From far away, Imperial patrols stopped in their tracks, as the ground beneath their feet trembled. Some fell to their knees, convinced that gods themselves were fighting above them. Others stared in terrified awe at the flashes of light and distant booms that marked each exchange of blows. As the fight raged, Skargrath began to laugh, even as blood dripped from the cracks in his armor. Yes, he bellowed. At last, a foe worthy of my name. Khorne himself watches through my eyes. Give me more. Saitama's expression remained flat, though there was the faintest crease between his brows. This was different. Back home, even the strongest opponents had crumbled after one punch. This one wasn't quite on his level, but it was lasting longer than anything he'd faced in years. For a brief, fleeting moment, he felt something stir inside him, a spark of the excitement he had once sought so desperately, but as quickly as it came, it began to fade. Skargrath's movements slowed, his blows grew sloppy, desperate, his laughter turned ragged. With a final, almost disappointed sigh, Saitama struck. One punch. The sound was like a thunderclap, rolling across the ruins and echoing through the broken hive. Skargrath's massive form froze, cracks spider-webbing across his armor. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, he exploded into a storm of gore and warp fire. The shockwave flattened the surrounding ruins, scattering debris for hundreds of meters. When the smoke cleared, Saitama stood alone at the center of a crater. High above, the warp screamed. Across the Immaterium, rivers of blood boiled higher, skulls rattled on vast thrones, and countless daemons howled in rage and ecstasy. Khorne himself had witnessed the moment his greatest champion fell, and he was not angered, he was intrigued. On battlefields light years away, berserkers paused mid-slaughter, struck by a vision of the bald, unarmored warrior who had defeated their avatar. Across 100 warbands, a single name began to spread, carried by screams and chants. Saitama. Back on Caltheron, Imperial Vox operators intercepted fragments of these transmissions. Reports flooded in from nearby systems, chaos warbands converging, cult uprisings intensifying, entire planets destabilizing. The Inquisitor stood aboard his ship, listening to the rising tide of panic. His mask hid his expression, but his voice was sharp and cold. The blood god has marked him. This was never merely about saving one world. Now the entire sector burns. On the battlefield below, Saitama stared at the spot where Skargrath had stood. He let out a slow breath, shoulders relaxing. That was kinda fun. he admitted softly. Then he glanced around at the shattered ruins, at the distant smoke of burning cities, at the terrified faces of Imperial scouts peeking from cover. His brief excitement faded, replaced by the familiar emptiness in his chest. Still, not enough, he muttered. Far away, in the shifting madness of the warp, 4 vast presences leaned closer to reality. One of them, crimson and wreathed in fire, growled with anticipation. Another, a whispering tide of ever-changing shapes, began to weave new threads. Saitama, unaware of their schemes, turned and began walking back toward the Imperials. Above him, the sky churned as if reflecting the turmoil in the warp, a storm building on the horizon. Something told him, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The sky above Caltheron rippled like oil on water, twisting with colors that should never have existed. What began as a distant shimmer became a vast, seething vortex of blue and violet flame, spreading tendrils of unnatural light across the heavens. Imperial ships in orbit shuddered as their systems faltered, their machine spirits howling in binary anguish. Vox channels erupted with distorted screams before falling silent, leaving only static that crawled beneath the skin of those who heard it. The Inquisitor stood aboard the command deck of his flagship, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, as he watched the storm expand. His voice was calm, but his posture was rigid with unease. This is no mere warp storm, he murmured. This is intent. The architect of fate moves against us. Below, on the surface, Saitama walked through the ruins of another city recently purged. The fires had barely cooled, the smell of ash and burnt stone thick in the air. He had grown used to destruction by now, but this place felt different. There was something wrong with the silence, as though the world itself were holding its breath. Even the winds moved strangely, twisting around him like invisible threads. He stopped, glancing over his shoulder. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, a shadow darting behind a broken column, but when he looked directly, there was nothing. Only the shifting smoke and the faint sound of whispers carried on the wind. Saitama frowned. Oh great, more creepy voices. The whispers grew louder, but they weren't like the guttural cries of the cultists, or the roaring demands of Khorne's followers. These were soft, almost seductive, layered atop one another in endless permutations. They didn't speak in a language he knew, yet he understood them all the same. They spoke of possibility, of choices not yet made, of power unclaimed. You are unbound, they cooed, unshamed. The others would chain you, define you, but we see you for what you truly are, a blank slate upon which destiny can be written. Saitama scratched his head, looking around. Yeah, no thanks. I've had enough of people trying to define me. The ruins around him shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly. Walls that had crumbled moments ago now stood whole. Fires burned in reverse, smoke flowing back into unlit candles. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and when he looked again, the scene had changed entirely. The ruined city was gone, replaced by an impossible landscape of spiraling towers and floating platforms, each one covered in shifting runes that hurt to look at for too long. The ground beneath his feet wasn't solid, just a swirling mosaic of colors and symbols that rearranged themselves with every step he took. Okay, he muttered, this is new. From the ever-changing structures ahead, a figure emerged. Unlike the brutal, straightforward presence of Skargrath, this one was elegant, almost delicate, its form constantly shifting. One moment it was a tall, robed figure, with a bird-like mask. The next a multi-armed creature with wings made of quills. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carrying a strange, lilting cadence. Welcome, wanderer, it said. You stand in the court of possibility, the heart of Tzeentch's domain. Saitama tilted his head. Tzeentch? Let me guess. Another one of those chaos god guys. The figure chuckled, a sound like paper tearing. Indeed, the great architect of fate, the shaper of all things, and you are a most intriguing anomaly. Saitama crossed his arms. Yeah, well, I'm not really interested in being someone's project. The figure ignored him, drifting closer. As it moved, The landscape shifted again. Now Saitama stood, not in an alien realm, but on a familiar street lit by yellow lamps. Send.
The noise of traffic filled the air, and the smell of food stalls wafted toward him, his breath caught in his throat. "This," he whispered. The figure's voice was gentle now, coaxing. "Do you see? The life you left behind. The home you long for. It can be yours again. You need only reach for it." People appeared on the street, familiar faces, neighbors, fellow heroes. Even Genos stood there, smiling in relief. "Master," he called, his voice warm. "You've returned." For a moment Saitama almost stepped forward. Almost. But then he noticed a detail that didn't fit. A flicker, at the edge of his vision, like a glitch in a screen. Genos's arm twitched unnaturally, looping the same movement again and again. The sound of the street vendors repeated, the same shout, perfectly identical, 3 times in a row. Saitama's expression flattened. "Huh. So this is fake." The illusion shattered. The city dissolved into shards of light, replaced once more by the swirling madness of Tzench's realm. The figure's tone shifted, becoming sharper. "You are difficult to sway. Most mortals would have wept with gratitude. But you see too clearly." "Yeah," Saitama said simply. "Nice try though." The figure's many forms quivered with irritation. "Very well then. If temptation fails, let confusion reign." The ground buckled beneath him. Suddenly, there were 100 paths leading in every direction, each one showing a different vision. In one, Saitama saw himself leading imperial armies, banners of gold and white bearing his symbol. In another, he stood as a dark god, skulls piled at his feet. In yet another, he returned home, only to find his city conquered by strange alien forces. The voices overlapped, a cacophony of futures. "Choose, choose, choose," they urged. "Every path is yours to take. Every choice is real." Saitama closed his eyes. The voices didn't matter. The paths didn't matter. He was still himself, and that was all that mattered. He took one step forward, ignoring the visions entirely. The illusions cracked, then collapsed like broken glass. The figure screamed, its form unraveling. "You are an aberration. No plan can bind you, no thread can weave you. Even the architect cannot shape you." Saitama looked down at it, expression unreadable. "Guess that means you wasted your time." With a single punch, he struck the ground. The entire realm shuddered and tore apart, reality snapping back into place. He stood once more amid the ruins of the real world, smoke rising from shattered buildings. The whispers were gone. But in the warp above, Tzench laughed. Not in defeat, but in anticipation. The laughter was soft, knowing. The Inquisitor's voice crackled through a nearby voxcaster, urgent and grim. "Saitama, report. The storm has worsened. Our scouts say entire worlds are falling to madness. Whatever you just faced, it has only begun." Saitama stared at the horizon, where the sky still writhed with unnatural colors. He flexed his hands slowly, his brow furrowing. "Figures," he muttered. "There's always a next round, far beyond mortal sight." Tzench whispered to the other chaos gods. "He cannot be bound by fate, but perhaps he can be broken by it." And the warp roiled with new schemes, each more dangerous than the last. The sky above Caltheron never returned to its natural state. The storm left by Tzench's machinations remained, a living wound of violet lightning and spiraling clouds, its light casting jagged shadows across the ravaged landscape. In the days following Saitama's confrontation with the Architect of Fate, Imperial forces struggled to reclaim even a semblance of control. Entire battalions were lost to madness, as soldiers turned on one another, screaming visions of futures that could never be. From orbit, the Inquisitor watched these reports with growing unease. His masked face betrayed nothing, but his hands were tightly clasped behind his back, the knuckles beneath his gloves pale and strained. Every communique spoke of the same pattern: cults rising faster than they could be purged, demonic manifestations occurring on planets thought secure, imperial commanders falling to paranoia or despair. The war was no longer fought in neat battle lines. It was a spreading plague of belief and terror. "Prepare the fleet for retreat," he ordered coldly. "We will regroup at the nearest fortress world. I will not lose more vessels to the madness here." A Vox officer hesitated. "And what of the champion, my lord?" The Inquisitor paused, his masked visage tilting toward the viewport where, far below, a single figure stood amid the ruins, utterly still. "Saitama will follow," he said, "whether he wills it or not." On the planet's surface, Saitama remained unmoving. His hands were loose at his sides, his expression unreadable, as he stared at the horizon. The fight with Skargrath, the illusions of Tsenchich, the endless chanting crowds, each had chipped away at his patience, but this was different. The very air felt alive with malice. He could feel eyes on him, not just from nearby soldiers or pilgrims, but from somewhere far beyond the veil of reality. The sensation built slowly, like pressure deep underwater. The hairs on his arms prickled. Then the whispers began. This time, there was no single voice, no isolated thread like before. It was a chorus, 4 distinct tones interwoven into one terrible harmony. A guttural roar dripping with rage, a silken purr that caressed the mind, a wet, wheezing chuckle full of disease and decay, and beneath it all, the endless, shifting laughter of something that never stopped scheming. "We see you," the voices intoned as one. "At last, all together, you have defied us each in turn, little mortal. You broke our champion of blood, rejected our temptations, shattered our illusion. You walk unclaimed, unbound, and that cannot be allowed." Saitama rolled his shoulders, unimpressed. "You guys talk too much." The voices ignored his dismissal. The ground beneath him began to crack and bleed, crimson rivers bubbling up through fissures in the stone. Black smoke poured skyward, coiling into shapes that writhed and dissolved before they could be fully understood. The air became heavy and wet, stinking of rot and iron. "Mortals kneel to us willingly," the guttural voice growled. "But you refuse to kneel. You strike without hate, without hunger. Your fists carry no faith. That is why we fear you." "Fear me?" Saitama repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You guys sure don't act like it." The silken voice rose, smooth and cutting. "Fear is not our way. Desire is. We crave you, warrior. Your strength, your defiance, the ecstasy of your strike as it meets unstoppable flesh. Come to us, and you will never be alone again." Endless sensations, endless conflict, endless purpose. "Hard pass," Saitama said flatly. The wheezing chuckle followed, sickly and slow. "Even now, you spread hope where none should exist. Every life you save becomes a seed. Every seed grows, until the bloom must rot. We will infect them. We will infect you. There is no escaping decay." "Man," Saitama muttered, "you guys are really persistent." The shifting laughter swelled, rising above the others. "Persistence is the shape of destiny. Threads weave and weave until the web closes around the prey. You think yourself outside of fate, but even you are part of our design. This conversation has happened before, and it will happen again. The outcome is inevitable." Saitama folded his arms. "If it already happened, then you know how it ends." The laughter paused. Saitama's eyes narrowed. The earth split open. From the abyss rose 4 colossal silhouettes, their forms only half real, shimmering between dimensions. One was a mountainous beast of brass and skulls, each movement shaking the ground. Another was an impossibly graceful figure of shifting perfection, its beauty painful to behold. The third was a bloated monstrosity, its swollen flesh bursting with rivers of pus and crawling insects. The last was a vast, ever-changing nightmare of feathers, eyes and mouths, never the same shape twice. Together they towered over the ruins like gods, because they were gods. Around the world, Imperial soldiers fell to their knees in terror. Vox channels filled with screaming prayers, the iron requiem formed ranks, bolters ready, though every marine knew this was a battle they could not win. The Inquisitor's voice cut through the chaos over the Vox, brittle with urgency. All forces fall back. This is no longer a battlefield, it is a summoning ground. The four have manifested as one. The shadows of the Chaos Gods moved as one. Their combined presence warped reality, turning the sky inside out, folding streets into impossible angles. Cultists erupted from the fissures, their bodies breaking apart as demons clawed their way free through them, using their flesh as gateways. The planet itself screamed. Saitama stood alone at the epicenter, his cape stirring in the unnatural wind, his fists clenched not from anger, but from a quiet, weary resolve. "All right," he said softly, almost to himself, "guess we're doing this." The four shadows leaned down, their many voices merging into a single deafening proclamation that rattled the bones of every living creature on Caltheron. "You will belong to us, or you will be erased." Saitama's reply was simple. "Nah," and then he moved. The ground detonated beneath his feet as he launched himself skyward, meeting the vast forms head-on. His first punch struck the crimson shadow of Khorne, shattering it into a cloud of burning embers. The others retaliated instantly, a wave of psychic fire, rot and illusion crashing over him like a tidal wave. For an instant, the battlefield vanished beneath a storm of color and sound. Soldiers screamed, some clawing at their eyes, others falling into catatonic silence. Even the Marines faltered, their armor buckling beneath the sheer pressure of the warp made manifest. Through it all, Saitama kept moving. Every strike he threw broke a piece of their combined form, scattering fragments of divine power across the sky. But for each fragment destroyed, more rose to take its place. The fight wasn't just physical. Every punch, every movement sent ripples through the warp itself, drawing the attention of countless lesser demons who poured through the cracks, eager to claim even a scrap of the power being unleashed. The Inquisitor watched from orbit, his hands gripping the railing so tightly the metal bent. "If he falls," he whispered, "there will be nothing left to stop them." Below, Saitama drove his fist into the heart of the writhing mass, tearing it apart in an explosion of light and shadow. The four voices screamed in unison, a sound that rattled the heavens. For a heartbeat, it seemed he might actually destroy them. But then the shadows reformed, merging into a single terrible shape, four wills united, no longer competing but cooperating, a union not seen in millennia. Saitama landed on a broken tower, breathing steadily, his gaze fixed on the colossal figure rising before him. The voice that came from it was calm, certain, final. "You cannot fight forever. Even the strongest fist must tire, and when you fall, we will claim all that remains." Saitama cracked his knuckles. "Good thing I don't get tired." And with that he leapt forward once more, vanishing into the storm as the final battle began. The world was unraveling. Caltheron's surface split like cracked glass as the colossal amalgamation of the four rampaged across it, its limbs tearing open the fabric of reality with every motion. The sky bent inward, a whirlpool of madness, where stars bled into rivers of molten color. Cities crumbled into nothingness, sucked into spiraling voids. The screams of billions mingled with the howls of demons, creating a sound so vast and terrible it seemed to shake the soul of the galaxy itself. Through this cataclysm, Saitama, his punches broke mountains, his movements faster than the human eye could follow. Each blow he landed scattered fragments of divine essence, tearing gashes through the warped monstrosity before him. Yet for all his power, the four always reformed, their voices united now in terrible harmony. "You are strong," they roared, "but strength is meaningless before eternity." Their attacks came as storms of raw chaos. Rivers of blood and brass fire surged upward, striking at him from Khorne's will. Tendrils of decay spread across the battlefield, crumbling anything they touched to dust in Nurgle's embrace. Whispers filled the air, promising him dominion, pleasure, and endless desire. Slanesh's tempting words piercing even the silence of his mind. And beneath it all, Slanesh's illusions warped reality itself, turning solid ground into traps and mirrors, making it impossible to know what was real. Saitama pushed forward through it all, unshaken, his cape burned away, his gloves shredded, but his face remained calm, his breathing steady. Every time they struck, he struck back harder. The weight of the gods' combined fury was immense, but he bore it with the same casual resolve he had always carried into every fight. Still, something was wrong. With every blow he threw, the battlefield changed. Not just physically, but spiritually. He felt the pull of the warp gnawing at the edges of his mind. Each strike caused the voices to grow louder, not quieter, and as the fight dragged on, he began to feel disconnected, not tired, never tired, but separated from the world around him, as though the very act of resisting them was unraveling the thread that bound him to this reality. Then the four struck together, a single, perfect blow. The ground beneath him dissolved into nothingness, and for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Saitama stumbled. The world vanished. He fell through a void of blinding light and utter silence. There was no wind, no heat, no sound, only an endless expanse of pale gold stretching in every direction. It was so still it felt oppressive, as though even time itself held its breath. Saitama landed softly, standing amidst the silence. His eyes scanned the space, but there was nothing. No ruins, no daemons, no inquisitor, no war, only the golden light and the faint hum of something vast and ancient. A single shape rose ahead of him, enormous and motionless, a throne, towering higher than any building he had seen in this galaxy. Upon it sat a figure so massive and still, it might have been a statue. Its form was withered, skeletal, but wrapped in armor of incredible intricacy. Wires, tubes, and ancient machinery crisscrossed its body, binding it to the throne like a living relic. Saitama stared. He didn't need to be told who this was. Somehow, he just knew. The Emperor, he murmured. The figure did not move. It didn't speak, didn't breathe, didn't even acknowledge him. Yet Saitama felt its presence like a weight on his chest. It was not alive in any way he understood, and yet it was everywhere, woven into the very air, into the silence itself. For the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Saitama hesitated. A voice, not spoken, not heard, but simply known, entered his mind. It was neither gentle, nor harsh, neither commanding, nor pleading. It simply was. "You have seen them," it said, "the four. You have faced their avatars, broken their schemes, but they are endless, and they will never stop. This war cannot be won through fists alone." Saitama clenched his hands, his brow furrowing. "So what do you want me to do? People keep calling me a savior, a god, a demon. I'm just a guy who likes to fight and maybe help out a bit when I can." "You are more than that here," the voice replied. "Your very existence has become a fulcrum. Faith, fear, and hatred turn upon you like a wheel. If you walk this path freely, the Imperium will fracture, chaos will feed on the worship you inspire, countless worlds will burn." Saitama stared up at the still figure on the throne. The silence between them felt like an eternity. "So what are you saying? You want me to be your champion?" There was no reply, only a deeper hum of ancient machinery, as though the very fabric of the Imperium awaited his answer. Saitama exhaled. "I'm not built for that. I don't care about empires, or fate. I just don't like watching people get hurt." "Then you must choose," the voice said. "Either leave this galaxy to its fate, or stand against the darkness not as a man, but as a symbol. To fight chaos forever, you must become something they cannot corrupt." Images filled his mind. Worlds burning beneath demonic invasions, planets filled with chanting cultists bearing his likeness on banners of blood, imperial soldiers executing civilians who refused to worship him. Every choice he made, every life he saved, rippling outward into consequences he could not control. The final image was of himself, standing alone in the ruins of a dead galaxy, surrounded by nothing but silence. Saitama's fists trembled. "I don't want that." The voice softened, like a whisper through stone. "Then let me bind you, not as a slave, but as a guardian. You will not be worshipped, you will not be known, you will simply fight, forever unseen,
Forever, unbroken, the galaxy will never speak your name, but it will survive because of you. He looked down at his hands. The idea of fighting forever was not what bothered him. He had been doing that for years, but the thought of being forgotten, of never again hearing his name spoken by anyone who truly knew him, that struck something deep inside him. For a moment, he saw Genos's face. He saw the Hero Association, the bustling streets of his city, the grocery store with its ridiculous discount signs. All of it felt impossibly far away. He took a slow breath. If it means they get to live, then fine. The throne did not move, but the golden light around him flared. The silence deepened until it felt like the universe itself was listening. Then go, the voice said, and strike not for glory, but for the survival of all. The light vanished. Saitama opened his eyes to find himself standing once more on Calthar. The four loomed above him, their combined form wavering as though briefly weakened. The Imperials were in chaos, their formations breaking apart. Above it all, the Inquisitor's fleet fired desperately into the atmosphere, their weapons barely scratching the surface of the battle. Saitama clenched his fists. His cape was gone, his uniform burned, but his resolve was absolute. The Emperor had spoken, and now, it was time to answer. The world had become a single battlefield. Caltharan's surface was no longer a planet so much as a scar. Cities reduced to molten slag. Oceans boiled away. Mountains flattened into dust. Above it, the Four's united form towered like a nightmare stitched from every horror imaginable. Their combined body shifted constantly, a swirling mass of brass, rot, flesh, eyes, and shadow. Every motion tore new rifts into reality, spilling daemons into the material realm by the thousands. The sky was a storm of fire and madness, purple lightning crawling across a blackened void. Imperial forces fought desperately in the shadow of this abomination, though their efforts were pitiful compared to the scale of the conflict. Space Marine strike teams and regiments of guardsmen fired into endless waves of cultists and lesser daemons, their bolters and lasguns, flashes of light swallowed by a sea of darkness. The air was filled with the thunder of macro cannons from orbit, orbital strikes pounding the planet in futile attempts to slow the enemy tide. The Inquisitor's fleet circled above, their vessels burning incense, and broadcasting hymns of battle through the void.
His voice boomed across all Vox frequencies, an anchor against despair. Stand firm in his name. Even if you die, you will die in his light. His words rang hollow even to his own ears. He had seen what Saitama faced, and he knew mortal faith alone could not turn the tide. On the surface, Saitama stood at the center of it all, his boots sinking into cracked stone that bled with warp light. His breathing was steady, his expression calm, but there was a weight in his eyes now, a determination colder than any he had felt before. The golden vision of the Emperor lingered in his mind like a fading echo, silent but absolute. The four roared, their merged voice shattering the air. You cannot win, mortal. You cannot destroy what is eternal. Saitama rolled his shoulders slowly. Yeah, he said, almost conversationally. People keep telling me that. The abomination struck first. Khorne's power manifested as a river of molten brass and skulls, surging toward him with the force of a world-ending tide. From its depths rose mountainous warriors clad in daemon-forged armor, each one wielding axes, the size of tanks. Saitama leapt forward, fist blurring. The wave exploded outward, its molten spray freezing mid-air before shattering into harmless shards. The warriors vanished like smoke, erased by a single punch. No pause. Nurgle's rot followed, a creeping miasma that turned stone to flesh and flesh to maggot-ridden slurry. Tentacles of diseased growth writhed upward, trying to entangle him. The stench was overpowering, thick with the promise of decay. Saitama exhaled once, then struck downward. The rot burned away, the ground purged clean in an instant. Even the air seemed to recoil from his blow, becoming sharp and clear again. But then came Slaanesh's, a chorus of voices, impossibly beautiful and utterly wrong, filled his mind. Illusions flooded his senses, visions of every desire, Every temptation, every perfect fight he had ever imagined. 1,000 versions of himself battled perfect rivals, their strength equal to his own. The sound of applause rose, adoration and validation offered freely. For just a moment, Saitama faltered. A part of him longed for it, to finally have a battle where he could truly go all out, to finally feel the thrill he had been chasing for so long. Then he remembered the Emperor's voice. "You will not be worshipped, you will not be known, you will simply fight." Saitama's eyes hardened. Nice try. His fist tore through the illusion, shattering Slanash's web. The voices turned to screams, fading into nothingness. Reality warped violently as Tanch unleashed his final trick. The world folded in on itself, layering possibilities on top of possibilities. Saitama saw infinite versions of himself, some kneeling before the Imperium, others ruling as a god of chaos. Still others dead and forgotten in shallow grey. Time became meaningless, every choice splintering into 1,000 more. He stood unmoved. "Doesn't matter. I know who I am." One punch and all the threads snapped. The illusions vanished, leaving only the towering form of the four. They screamed, no longer four voices, no longer united. Rage boiled off them in waves, the ground quaking beneath their fury. Their combined body began to split apart, fissures of raw power cracking across its surface. The Inquisitor's voice reached Saitama faintly through the vox, full of desperation. "If you are to strike, do it now. End this, or all is lost." Saitama crouched, the air swirling around him. Dust and debris rose, suspended by the sheer force of the pressure building in his body. His eyes locked on the core of the abomination, a single pulsating mass of warp light that beat like a monstrous heart. The four sensed what was coming. Their voices rose in a single panicked cry. "No!" Saitama launched himself forward. The sound of his movement alone cracked the air like thunder. He shot through layers of reality, faster than sight, faster than thought. His fist struck the core dead center. For a moment there was nothing. No sound, no light, no sensation. Then the universe roared. The impact was cataclysmic. The entire planet buckled, tectonic plates cracking like brittle glass. The warp storm above collapsed inward, sucking demons back into the Immaterium as it imploded. The four's united form shattered, fragments of divine power scattering across the galaxy like falling stars. The shockwave swept across Caltheron, flattening armies, toppling spires, silencing every gun and every scream. Imperial vessels in orbit were hurled backward, their shields flaring to near destruction. Even the Inquisitor fell to his knees, awe crushing the breath from his lungs. When the dust settled, there was silence, true silence. Saitama stood at the center of a crater that stretched for miles. His uniform was gone, burned away completely, leaving only scorched skin beneath. He stared at his fist for a long moment, then let it fall to his side. Above, the sky cleared, for the first time in living memory. Sunlight broke through the clouds of ash and smoke. Across the battlefield, soldiers and pilgrims alike emerged from hiding. They stared at him with wide, trembling eyes. Some began to cheer. Others fell to their knees, weeping. The words spread quickly, carried on desperate voices. Savior, Saint, God. Saitama closed his eyes. He remembered the Emperor's promise to fight forever, unseen, unnamed. "I told you guys," he said softly, though none could hear him over the cries of the crowd. "I'm not a god." He turned and began to walk away as the Imperials surged forward, their worship reaching a fever pitch behind him. The Inquisitor watched from a distance, his mask hiding his expression, though his voice was heavy with grim understanding. "No matter what he says," he whispered, "they will never let him go." Far above, in the warp's endless depths, the four's laughter returned, not united this time, but fractured, defiant, hungry. They had been defeated, but not destroyed. And as Saitama walked into the horizon, alone beneath the dawning light, the galaxy held its breath, knowing this was not the end. It was only the first blow in a war without end. The ruins of Caltheron stretched endlessly beneath a pale, uncertain dawn.
Smoke rose in thin, wavering columns from the broken cities, curling upward like the last breaths of the dead. The sunlight that filtered through the clearing skies seemed strange, almost alien, as though the world itself was uncertain how to exist without the shadow of the warp storm looming overhead. Saitama walked alone through the devastation, his pace unhurried, his expression as blank as ever. Behind him, the sounds of rebuilding had already begun, timid, halting noises carried by the wind. Imperial workers and surviving guardsmen toiled amid the ruins, their hands bloody and raw as they dragged bodies into neat rows, repaired shattered fortifications, and raised new banners over the wreckage. Voices rose in hymns of gratitude and grief, merging into a single haunting chorus. Whenever Saitama passed near, they fell silent, bowing their heads, some kneeling outright. A few whispered his name, though he never acknowledged it. He simply kept walking, their reverence rolling off him like rain against stone. To him, they were not worshippers or followers. They were just people trying to survive, clinging to meaning in a galaxy that seemed determined to take it away. He paused at the edge of a massive crater, the very one his final blow had created. The land was scarred for miles in every direction, a perfect circle of annihilation. At its center, nothing remained, no ash, no stone, not even dust. It was as if the universe itself had been erased there. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint rustle of wind. Saitama stared at it for a long time. He didn't feel pride or regret, only a vague sense of familiarity. Back home, when he fought too hard, he sometimes left craters like this, though never so vast. The difference was that there, people eventually filled them in, built new roads, planted trees. Here, he knew this wound would never heal. Footsteps approached behind him. The Inquisitor's voice followed, calm and clipped. "You ended it." Saitama didn't turn around. "Did I?" There was a pause. The Inquisitor came to stand beside him, his mask gleaming faintly in the new light. "You shattered their avatars. You forced the Four to retreat. The warp storm has receded. For now, this sector is safe." "For now," Saitama echoed, the Inquisitor's hands folded behind his back. "You have no idea what you've done, do you? Billions will speak of this day for generations. Songs will be sung. Sects will rise in your name. The Imperium will use your image to rally the faithful, while heretics will whisper that you are proof the Emperor has rivals." Saitama's gaze remained fixed on the crater. "And you, what do you think I am?" The Inquisitor's silence stretched before he answered. "I think you are a weapon we cannot control. That terrifies me more than any daemon." Saitama glanced at him, his face unreadable. "I told you before, I'm just a guy." "No," the Inquisitor said sharply. "You are an idea now, and ideas are more dangerous than fists." A distant explosion punctuated his words, far away in the ruins of a hive city. Saitama didn't react, but the Inquisitor stiffened. A Vox officer's panicked voice crackled over his comm bead. "Uprising, my lord. Cult remnants are rallying. They claim the Deliverer has risen to overthrow the Emperor. They're using his image." Saitama sighed. "Figures." The Inquisitor's head tilted toward him. "Do you see now? Even when you fight for them, they twist your actions. Faith is never still. It grows, festers, divides. You cannot simply walk away." Saitama crouched, picking up a broken aquila from the ground. He turned it over in his hand. The two-headed eagle cracked down the center. "Back home," he said quietly, "I just wanted to be a hero, help people. That's it. But here, every punch I throw, it feels like I'm breaking more than just my enemies." The Inquisitor's voice softened, almost imperceptibly. "You are breaking their reality. They cannot comprehend you, so they make you into something they can." Saitama tossed the broken aquila aside. "Then maybe I just won't let them see me anymore." The Inquisitor's masked face tilted slightly. "You would vanish, after this." Saitama stood, brushing dust from his hands. "I'll keep fighting, but not for them, not for their thrones or their gods or their just for the people caught in the middle, the ones who don't have a choice." The Inquisitor's posture was rigid, but something in his tone shifted. "If you do this, they will still make stories of you. They will still worship you. Even your absence will be twisted into meaning. Let them, Saitama said, as long as they're alive to do it. I don't care. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind across the crater. Then the Inquisitor inclined his head slightly. Very well, I will not stop you, but know this. Chaos will come again, they always do, and when they return, they will come for you first. Saitama turned and began walking toward the horizon. Good, he said simply. He didn't look back. Behind him, the Imperials moved to reclaim the land, raising new banners over old wounds. Already, priests were leading chants in his name, while others condemned him as a heretic in the same breath. Two faiths, opposing and yet born from the same event, began to spread like fire through dry grass. In orbit, the Inquisitor watched from his ship's viewing deck. His hands were clasped tightly, his voice low. You will never be free, warrior. You will never be silent. Even if you disappear, your shadow will cover the stars. In the depths of the warp, the four stirred once more. Their laughter was distant, but growing, each god nursing their wounds, already plotting their next move. They had been defeated, but not destroyed. Saitama walked on, alone, his figure shrinking against the vastness of the ruined world. To the Imperium, he was a savior. To chaos, he was a threat. To himself, he was still just a quiet man, looking for a fight worth his time. And in a galaxy consumed by endless war, there would never be an end to the battles waiting ahead. He exhaled softly, the faintest hint of a smile on his lip. Guess this'll keep me busy. For a while, the wind carried his words away as he vanished into the ash and light, a solitary figure moving forward into a war without end.